ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
Hello and welcome back to Unlimited Limited, the show where we work together to get better at Star Wars Unlimited's limited environments. Today we're going to be doing my favorite video of each set cycle, which is the cards I was most wrong about. So what exactly I mean by that is the cards that I usually ballpark it as like 2 letter grades, so if I gave it like a D plus and it was actually a C, that usually is a contender for this video. So of course I was a little bit wrong about like a lot of cards, right? Like I gave something a C, maybe it deserves to be a C plus. I gave something a B, maybe it deserves to be a B minus, right? But there's so many of those, and I don't think it's particularly interesting. I think we can learn more about the decision-making process towards evaluating cards that I was very wrong about. So those are the ones we'll talk about. Before we get into it, please make sure to... Did you think I was going to ask you to subscribe? That would be ridiculous. You haven't even seen the video yet. Don't do that. But what I do want you to do is go down into the comments and write cards that you think that you were most wrong about this set in your evaluations. So don't watch the video and then do it, because then maybe you'll be primed by the ones I mentioned. I want to hear the ones that you think that you got really wrong, either by massively overrating it or massively underrating it, or maybe you rated it correctly, but it was for a completely different reason. I would love to hear that before we go on. I'm not going to wait for you though, because you can just hit pause. Okay, let's get into it. So we'll start with leaders. The first leader I was wrong about was Jabba the Hutt. So I gave him a C+, which means good, but I think he was closer to a B. I would call Jabba the best villainy leader this set. I know some people will disagree. I think some people say it's Sly. Some people say it's Yularen. I think it's Jabba. Now, why did I give Jabba a C+? I'll just tell you straight away, it was primarily for the 2-8 stat line. 2-8 is a real liability in some sense because it doesn't attack very well, but 2-8 is also a real boon in some sense as well. It makes Jabba a lot stickier, especially in a format where leader removal is very limited, and just removal in general, right? But I still figured that the line would often go, you flip Jabba and your opponent just runs 2 units into it. I figured that, maybe you would get Jabba's trigger off once, and that ended up not being true at all. And the reason is there were just so many good sentinels in this format, especially in green. And I think everybody would agree that Jabba Green was the best version of Jabba. You got Cruel Commandos, I think was a common, at most an uncommon, but I think a common. You got Naboo Security, which was a common. You got the 4-6 with Plot and Sentinel. There were just so many good Sentinels in the Jabba green colors, and they just went so well with him, because as soon as Jabba was behind a Sentinel, you could pretty much guarantee you were getting that ability off once a turn. If you got it off once, you felt pretty good, but if you got it off like twice throughout the game or 3 times, you're probably just going to win that game, right? The ability is so strong. Now, elephant in the room is Retaliate. There was like often a Jabba skill check where if you were the Jabba player, you would basically never attack base if your opponent was in blue, because Retaliate was a very clean way to deal with Jabba through the Sentinels. But that was pretty much it, right? If you were able to set up Sentinels in front of Jabba, you're probably just going to win that game unless your opponent has some crazy space aggro plan. Jabba ended up being probably closer to a B because of the Sentinels, but I can understand where the C+ came from. He is, like, despite having 8 HP, somewhat fragile because he doesn't tend to take other leaders with him he doesn't tend to take a lot of other units with him when he dies, right? He probably dies in 2 attacks and doesn't even kill any of the things. And then his ability on the front is strong. Like, I like ping abilities in draft, but it's not excessively strong and can sometimes be played around. So I think Jabba, though, is a B. And I should have started with Leia. So Leia's the obvious one. I thought, just to be clear, B- is not a bad grade. I gave Leia a B-. I thought that Leia would be great. I was really excited to play her. I did not expect her to be the best leader in the set, and she was. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Leia is very good for a number of reasons. Firstly, for anyone who played in Legends of the Force, they may remember Snoke as one of the 3 good leaders in that set. And Leia's ability, so Snoke's ability was basically the same as Leia's, except instead of disclosing and putting experience on a unit that doesn't share an aspect with a disclosed card, Snoke pays 1 and puts an experience on a villainy unit with the highest power. So they both have their unique restrictions, and I wasn't sure which of one would be more restrictive. It turns out Snoke is more restrictive. You can pretty much always do the disclose thing in most circumstances, and there's just so many good one drops in this set as well that Leia just make very good, right? Gunji was a very good card in Legends of the Force for a number of reasons. Leia can make a ton of Gunjis. There's a couple of 1/4s. There's a 0/4. There's a 1/3, all for 1. And Leia just turns those into real units and then can continue to buff them so that they stay relevant throughout the game. Now, I, of course, when I saw Leia, I thought, yeah, okay, she's like kind of like Snoke, maybe more restrictive, maybe less restrictive. Turns out less. But you know, the paying 1 is real. That will ruin your curve, and that now in hindsight, that's true. Sometimes it would be nice if you could play on curve, but you really need to activate Leia's ability. Absolutely, that does happen sometimes. But just the flexibility of choosing if you do it or not, and sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes you're going to your 4 resource turn and you need to play a 3-drop because that's just what you have in your hand. Leia provides a way for you to really smooth out your curve in those sort of circumstances. And then when she flips into a 4/7, she doesn't stay a 4/7 for very long, right? She attacks immediately, almost always is able to give herself an experience token, and turns into a 5/8, and that is a very scary leader threat. And then next turn turns into a 6/9. And then if you're able to flip her and put, say, like Unveiled Might on her or something like that, then just forget about it, right? That's like a absolutely bonkers Leia flip. Leia ended up being incredibly, incredibly good. And I need to stop undervaluing experienced leaders because I saw this and I was like, oh, she's like Snoke from the last set who ended up being a top 3 leader. Yeah, she's pretty good. I need to start remembering, okay, no, free experience means very good. However, did I learn my lesson? I don't know. The set review for Lawless Time comes out in a couple of weeks. I haven't started it yet, but I have seen a leader that gives free experience, and I don't think it's a very good leader. So stay tuned. Maybe I'll be wrong about this for the same reason. Maybe I'll be wrong about this again. Maybe I'll undervalue a experienced leader again. But Leia ended up, of course, being very good. Dryden, I gave a C2. He's probably closer to a D+. Now, you guys are going to call me crazy, but before I start, I don't want you to walk away thinking Dryden is unplayable or bad. I think Dryden is actually sometimes okay. You really have to get there though. So I'll just start by the reason I gave Dryden a C, of course, is as we all know, ambush is just the best keyword. I was gonna say in limited, but just in the game probably. And just kind of being able to give something ambush for free every turn is ridiculous. Now, I say for free, discarding a card is a big downside. And the deck building restriction for Dryden is also kind of interesting, because when you're building a typical Star Wars Unlimited limited deck, you're probably going to have like, I don't know, what's a good number? Like 4 or 5, maybe 6 drops and above. With Dryden, you want to have more than that, right? You want to have a different curve. You want to have your standard curve, where, you know, you have a decent amount of 2s and 3s, some 4s, some 5s, but then you also want to have a spike at 6 and above. And you can sometimes even do that out of aspect if you're just planning to discard them to Dryden. Of course, you prefer not to, because then when you flip Dryden, you can give those things ambush if they aren't, you know, if you have to pay like 10 for something because it's out of aspect, you might have trouble doing that, but I digress. Now, why did Dryden end up not being very good? Discarding a card is a real cost. Absolutely. You're going to be playing behind cards in hand very regularly. But I figured the upside of kind of keeping control of the board is good enough, because you'll usually, when you're ambushing, be able to do it in such a way where you keep your unit, your opponent doesn't keep theirs, and they'll be playing from behind on the board. And sure, you'll be playing behind from your hand, but maybe that's worth it, right? Usually it is, right? Usually having board presence is the most important thing to do in a game of limited Star Wars Unlimited. But it turns out, again, and it's kind of, it's a large number of reasons why Dryden didn't quite perform the way I was expecting him to, and I think, and this is maybe a little tinfoil hatty of me, but I think it was the Sentinels. In the same way that they really helped out Jabba, they really hurt Dryden. And the reason is because ambush is a lovely keyword that gives you a ton of agency, all action condensed, in a way that promotes your board being, you know, flourishing, right? But if your opponent has a Sentinel down with an awkward, like, power or HP, then that agency of choosing where your ambush unit is going to go is removed from you. And sometimes that can make the ambush kind of just not worth it. There's a few other reasons as well. You know, obviously flipping on 7 is a big liability. And sure, he technically has better stats than Leia. He's a 5/7, she's a 4/7. But Leia's not really a 4/7, right? She's a 5/8. And she also comes down a turn earlier than Dryden. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that can go wrong with Dryden. There's a lot that can go right too. You do have to build your deck quite top heavy, which can have risks as well. I don't think he's unplayable, but I think you really have to get there and you really have to know what you're doing. I don't think I would try to bring him to like a very competitive event because I would feel like I would want a lot of practice with him before I did something like that. And I'm probably not going to get a ton of practice with Dryden Voss because he's a rare and usually I want to win my games. All right, let's go next. So Luthen is the leader that I think I valued the most incorrectly. I overvalued him, I think, pretty substantially. So, as sad as this makes me, because Luthen is the first and to this date only showcase I've ever opened. It was at one of the first drafts I did for Secrets of Power. And I like the character a lot, but I'm trying not to let my biases get in the way of my evaluation of this card. 2/7 is substantially unfortunate stats. And it's weird for me to say that because it really isn't. Right? Like 3/7 is considered premium stats for a 5-flip leader. So yeah, you're losing 1, sure, fine. But like 3/6 is also fine stats for a 5-flip leader in limited. And 2/7 is the same number of stats as a 3/6. But the 2 is just a real problem. So I'll just give you my thought process again for why I gave Luthen a high grade. And it's because I thought that, it incentivizes you to do things, it pays you off for doing things that you were probably going to be doing anyway, right? Usually, unless you're in some crazy hyper aggro list, you want to keep control of the board, in most circumstances in limited, right? You want to be attacking into your opponent's units in a favorable way, and Luthen pays you off for doing that. Because not only does it create more favorable trades for you, right? If you have like a 2/3 and they have a 3/3, now that's a trade that you can make. But it also finds occasional 2-for-1s, right? If they have a 3/3 and you have a 3/3, but they also have an X1, right? Now you can trade the 3/3s and kill the X1. That's great. That's incredible if you're able to do that, right? It goes across arena as well, which can help tremendously. And again, it's not asking you to do anything weird. You're going to be doing this anyway. This just makes it work better for you. And then on the flip, it's the same thing, but better, right? So I figured, yeah, okay. And then of course, your opponent will see this and want to play around it. And usually they're going to be wanting to attack your units anyway, but now they really want to. And anything that like kind of removes your opponent's agency is usually better than you expect it to be, right? You want to be taking choices away from your opponent. And even if it's usually right for them to be attacking your units anyway, now they kind of have to, and you can maybe make that work to your advantage. Unfortunately, though, I think the 1 ping wasn't quite enough. 2 was probably too strong. I don't know how you balance this leader and make it like good and limited. Just to be clear, I don't think it's like bad. It's probably a hair better than Dryden, maybe a little bit more than a hair. It's probably better than Dryden. It's probably between a D+ and a C-. It's just the 2/7 style line is a real liability. When it flips, it doesn't really do anything. It's sort of like Jabba, where your opponent can pretty easily clean it up with 2 attacks, but unlike Jabba, it doesn't play insanely well with Sentinels, right? Not in the same way. So I just think Luthen didn't quite work. Maybe it would have worked in a different set. I don't know, because it does still seem strong to me, but the 2/7 is just kind of a real issue, unfortunately. And lastly for leaders, we have Sabe, who is the leader that I most overrated. So I gave Sabe a B. I thought she was going to be the best leader in the set. And she was good, don't get me wrong. C+ is a fine grade for a leader. She was good. But she was by no means the best, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So the reason I gave Sabe a B, it was kind of threefold. The first one wasn't so much a reason, but I feel like I should mention it anyway because a lot of people do. In Limited, you only have 30 card decks. Pretty easy to deck someone out in a limited game. 30 cards is not a lot. You draw 6 at the beginning of the game. That's 24 left. You draw 2 a turn. That's not that many. And then if you're having your opponent, kind of instead of drawing 2, drawing 3, I guess, but they don't get 1. It's like instead of milling 2, they mill 3 at the beginning of each of their turns. Sure, I don't know. However, whatever way you want to put it, you're going to be winning the mill race in this. But the problem really is, does that actually do anything for you? Because, okay, great. I hit my opponent, let's say, 5 times through the course of the game before they win. I've milled them 5 cards. Okay, cool. Awesome. Great. Now, let's say I hit my opponent 10 times before the end of the game. Okay. That probably is enough to do 30 damage to their base, right? Or like close to it. You know, okay, I've like milled them a decent amount. Maybe mill is like getting to the point where it might be a consideration for my opponent, but they also have 26 damage on their base. Like, that's probably going to matter first, right? And I'm not saying the mill thing will never happen with Sabe. It will sometimes happen, but I don't think it's something that you should really consider when evaluating this leader. Now, the other reason I thought she was good, and this actually is good, is the actual ability of, looking at 2 and putting 1 away. And the reason why this is particularly good in Limited, I think, even better than in Constructed, is because in Limited, you don't really have much redundancy. In Constructed, let's say I'm playing Han 2 Blue Force, which is a deck I am playing, and my opponent hits my base with something and activates Sabe. And let's say it's the 3 resource turn or something. So they hit me with their 2-drop. They look at the top and they see Chirrut and Poe. Okay. They probably put Poe into the discard. Now I have, now next turn I draw Chirrut and I can play that on curve. That's fine. Or maybe I already had another Poe, or I used to run a list that ran a Kiadimundi. Maybe I have that as my 5-drop, right? Like, there's just like a lot of things where like, yeah, sure, it kind of sucks that I'm not going to top deck a Poe next turn, but like I have other stuff to do and it's going to be almost as good, right? Where in Limited, that's not necessarily the case. Your opponent's deck might have 2 removal spells in it. If you hit Sabe, if you attack and you activate Sabe, you see one of those removal spells, you put it in their bin, you've just removed half of the removal from their deck, right? That's way better. The redundancy, you can really mess up some people's curves in Limited with Sabe, and that is something that actually is very good with this leader. That's probably her main thing. And then, of course, on the flip side, a 3/6 leader that attacks as a 4/6 is also quite respectable. The stat line is good. I think Sabe is a good leader, but I think that between the fact that she is, I think, doesn't promote being fast enough for the really fast decks like Deidre and Yularen, and can't really keep up in the later game with like leaders like Leia and Jabba. I think that she's very awkwardly positioned this set. I could see a world where Sabe is actually one of the best Limited leaders. I just don't think it's this one. All the Sentinels, a lot of them are X5s or higher, and that's very awkward for Sabe. If she is ever able to connect and do her like flip thing, that's really cool. You get to Bazine your opponent. That's always nice, right? But I don't think that happens too often. There's just so many good Sentinels. Again, I don't think Sabe's a bad leader, but I think that she's unfortunately not as good as I was hoping, which is a shame because I think this leader is actually a very interesting leader. And I mean, she's seen playing Constructed, and maybe she'll see play more after rotation. Who knows? All right, so here's a whole slide I have about cards I was wrong about, and it's just cards that are really good in Leia. Because I wasn't expecting Leia to be as dominant as she was, and these cards are not exceptional outside of Leia. They're between D's and C minuses. I think you could argue A-Wing, Populous Advisor, and Skyhopper maybe brush C minus. But like BMO is definitely a D. Donnie Pilgrim's probably a D. Maybe, yeah, it's probably a D. But in Leia, these are all, C pluses or B minuses, right? Populous Advisor was one of the best possible turn 1 plays you could do in Leia, right? That's Gunji with like upside, arguably. I guess Gunji has the Force, which mattered a lot in that set, but still, you get the idea. Skyhopper as well, having a 2/5 on turn 2. Awesome, great, right? So I was wrong about all of these cards, but only in Leia. I was right about all of them outside of Leia. So take from that what you will. Now let's get into the space units. So we'll start with Defense Fleet X-Wing. I gave it a C because I figured, yeah, all right, 1/4 stats on a space unit for 3. That's like fine, I guess. It has Sentinel. That's cool. Sure, whatever. This card's, it's not very good. I think I mentioned this in a PQ video of mine where I went to a PQ and I had this in my deck, and it was the only, a limited PQ, of course. I'm not playing this in Constructed. It was the only card in my deck that I did not play once that day. I always resourced it. The one attack is just so awkward. I figured when I gave it this grade, I was like, okay, sure. If you don't really have much of a space plan, you put this up there, it stalls your opponent for maybe like 2 turns, I guess. But it just didn't. It just, the one attack is so rough because you're playing this, your opponent's going to go, okay, and then they play Crate Veteran or Darrow Commando or some good 3-drop on the ground, right? And you've just entirely wasted your turn 2 play. You're going to be doing 1 damage to their base every turn, and they're going to be doing 4 TORs or 3 TORs. It's just not good. I guess there are niche scenarios where sometimes it does stall your opponent's space for a little bit, or you're able to pump it with Leia, and then maybe eventually it starts to become a real threat in the same way that the 1/1 hidden raid one from Forged Starfighter, I think it was called. Don't quote me on that. From Legends of the Force worked with Snoke, but this is like 2 turns slower than that. This is not an aggro card, and you shouldn't be treating it as such. The one attack is so rough. If this was like a 2/4, maybe even a 2/3 Sentinel, I think it would be a lot better, but this is just rough. It's not unplayable. It's probably still like a D+, but that might be generous. Next we have Diplomatic Envoy, which I gave a B- to. It's probably closer to a C-. So when I gave this the B-, I knew that this was never a turn 1 play. I know it costs 2, so it's technically kind of a turn 1 play, and sometimes you very reluctantly needed to do that, but it's not really a turn 1 play, right? This is something you play on like turn 6, and then you ambush out a 5-drop, and it's really cool when that happens. But the problem is, how often are you getting to turn 6 where you've had such good agency over what you've been able to resource such that you have this, something to disclose, and something to ambush? Now, the thing you ambush can be the thing you disclose. That can happen. But, you know, you could be in a situation where you only have like a really big blue card or something and no green cards. You're like, man, I wish I could ambush this really big blue card, but I need to disclose green. You know, that's not a hoop that happens too much, but it is still a hurdle. But usually by the time you're getting to the point where you could do, and just to be clear, if you ever do the thing where you play this, disclose, ambush on a 5-drop, that's probably good, right? That's probably good, but it costs you 2 cards and multiple actions, and you've had to resource in a certain way throughout the entire game to make this happen. It's just really awkward. I don't think it's very good, and I think I overvalued it pretty substantially. I think those are the only 2 space units on my list, though. Those are the 2 that I was most wrong about in space that I can remember. So let's move on. You're going to see a theme here. It's cards that are good in Leia and Sentinels, which are primarily good in Jabba, but are good elsewhere. So I gave Dogmatic Shock Squad a D+. I figured for 6, you wanted to be doing something way more interesting than playing a 4/6 Sentinel. Also, it has plot, but I correctly identified that that would not come up super often. All of the good villainy leaders flip on 4 or 5, right? There's Deidre, Yularen. Deidre flips on 4, then Yularen, Jabba, and Sly all flip on 5. And then there are a couple of other leaders that I guess Price flips on 6. I don't think I ever saw anybody play that. Dryden flips on 7, I guess, sure, right? Like I knew that you probably weren't going to be playing this set with plot, and you probably aren't playing this set with plot. You're very rarely going to delay your Jabba flip turn a turn so you can do this, right? But that doesn't really matter because you flip Jabba and you play a 5-drop, hopefully with Sentinel, and then next turn you play this. And then at that point, you're probably just good. You're probably just going to win that game unless your opponent has some crazy space aggro plan. I'm giving the Jabba example. I should be talking more generally. This card Sentinels ended up playing really well in this format, even outside of Jabba. Of course, they're better there, but even outside of Jabba, this is just something you would want in like most of your blue villainy decks. It's probably closer to like a C, probably like a C+ in Jabba. I just did not expect the Sentinels to be so valuable in this set. I think the 6 is a breakpoint, though. I think if it was a 4/5, it would actually probably be closer to this because then it just dies to Leia instantly. But 4/6 means it survives at least 1 attack from that, almost certainly, without some kind of like plot shenanigans or something like that. Next is Rotunda Senate Guards. I gave it a C+. It's probably closer to a B, and I feel the need to explain both of those. So there's a card called Awake Inspectors, which I talk about way too much, given how relevant it is to anything. It's a card from Legends of the Force. It's a 4-cost 4/5, doesn't have the Force trait, so it's really just like a stat body. And I think of that as like the definition of a C, that's an okay card. You are fine putting that in your deck. It's reasonably statted for the cost, and that's all it is. And I figured, and that is what this card is, right? It's 4, and it's blue, and it's a 4/5, but it's a little bit better. So I was like, you know what? Awakened Spectres is a C. This card is a little better than Awakened Spectres, probably a C+. But again, here it is, me undervaluing Sentinel in this set. This set had Sentinel be incredibly, incredibly good. And it usually, the way this was statted in a way where it usually could just eat something right away. Like you played this down and your opponent had to throw something at it to kill it. And then optionally they could kill it with something else and lose that. Or they could just go back to whatever they were doing before since this no longer has Sentinel. But then you get to untap and attack with this, and that's pretty good. And the fact that it usually at this phase of the game, like on turn 3, is able to 2-for-1 something was really good. Now, B might be a little bit ambitious, but just the way it played... So there's 2 reasons I did that. A, Jabba. This card is ridiculous. Of course, it comes down the turn before Jabba's flip turn, but oftentimes you could sequence that in a way where it worked out really nicely for you. Because it is just blue. That is another reason I rated it highly. It might be a tiny bit of an overrate at this point, but the fact that it was just blue means that you could pick this very highly in the draft portion. This, because you would play, I can't think of a single example of a blue deck you wouldn't put this in. So I think it's closer to a B. Next is Daedra Miro. Here I go undervaluing Ambush again. I gave it a B-, probably closer to a B+. This was pretty much one of the best possible finishers you could have in your villainy decks, in Daedra or Yularen or even Jabba or Sly. Yeah, like just all of the good villainy decks. This was a great finisher. I think I gave it a B- because it is a tiny bit understated, but the fact that it immediately gives you a spy and probably gives you 2 unless your opponent the fact it's understated doesn't actually come up as often, because if something is truly understated then it can sometimes be ignored. But Daedra, despite being a tiny bit understated, can't really be ignored because she'll just keep generating value. Because you throw Daedra down, you kill something, next turn if they choose to ignore it, you kill something again, you probably lose Daedra, but you've gotten 2 spies. And you've 2-for-1 them also, right? Like, that's pretty nice. I think Daedra's closer to a B+. She's the top end you wanted in decks like this. Plus, again, with how good Sentinels are, you could oftentimes just keep hitting face with Daedra, hiding her behind Sentinels, and then just getting all these spies to clear out your opponent's units or continue the face onslaught. Yeah, Daedra was very strong. Next is Naboo's Security Force. Again, gave it a C. It's probably closer to a B-. This is the card you needed sometimes to protect Leia. It was great in that situation. Sometimes this would be great at protecting Jabba. Those were the 2 main cases for it, but it came up in other situations too. It was just like a very good unit, very efficient. And I mean, 6 costs for 5/7 of stats, that probably is like C, maybe a little lower, but the upside is very, very relevant. The fact that like it didn't die to Shadowcrawler as well, which was really nice. But that's kind of a weird line to consider. This disclose cost was basically free. What wasn't free was sometimes you would play this and your opponent would do whatever else they needed to do and usually manage to get initiative because you have a big Sentinel they don't want to run all their small units into. And then next turn they could continue doing what they want because this does only have Sentinel for that 1 turn. Sometimes, of course, also you would put the Sentinel on something else too. But usually this would hold Sentinel on its own. Yeah, very good. Just me undervaluing Sentinel. Synthochaz, I overrated a little bit. And I think there's 2 reasons for that. The first one was because there was a lot of talk about this card and how it was like genuinely the best card in the set, or at least top 3. And I think that's true, just to be clear. I think this card is incredibly good. And I might have let it get to me a tiny bit, just how... it's just fine in draft. It's good in draft, but it's not great. The only leader that was like, the leader itself was red that was good was Daedra, and Cinta wasn't really good in Daedra, right? Like, let's think of the 6 flip leaders in this set. There's Leia. That's it. So in terms of plotting, the only leader you would ever plot this out would be Leia under most circumstances. And Leia red was good, but I think it was the weakest deck I think it was the weakest Leia deck, which still makes it, a top 5 deck. But now that's not to say that you would never play Leia red, obviously. Yeah, Leia red is great, but I think that it was the weakest version of the deck, and so Synthetic Cast just didn't really quite have a place. Sometimes it was just fine to play it out of hand, right? A 6 cost 5/5 that action sheets is okay, but where this card really shines, right, is plotting it out. And I think I didn't realize, well, of course, how could I have realized? I would never expect, I didn't expect that there would just not really be a 6-flip red deck that was good. And there's only one, and it's Leia Red, and it's the worst version of Leia. So I think that this just unfortunately was poorly positioned in the format. I could very easily see this actually being a B in a different format where there were more 6-flip leaders and red was a good color for them. But yeah, I think she will continue to be good and constructed, probably better after rotation because all the pilot leaders are going to get really good. So keep an eye out for Luke and Boba Green. Next we have Hunter, who I underrated. I gave him a B-. He's probably actually closer to a B+. So it's for a couple of reasons. The first one being that the 7/6 stat line is a huge breakpoint in the format. So one of the best things your opponent can do on 7 is Shadow Crawler, kill your biggest thing. And you can kill Hunter with Shadow Crawler, but it dies too. The best thing that Shadow Crawler can do, of course, is kill your biggest thing and live, and it usually did that, but it can't with Hunter. And the fact Hunter comes down a turn early means that your opponent just needs to do that as their first action on 7, and then they've traded their 7 resource turn for your 6 resource turn, basically, because now you can do 7 resources for whatever you're going to do. And if you're able to have initiative and like give this experience with Leia or put equipment on this or something like that, right, it just becomes ridiculous. The way that it's just positioned so well. It kills the 5/7 Sentinel. It kills Cruel Commandos, a 5/5 Sentinel. It kills the 4/6 Sentinel. And that's assuming you even want to hit Sentinels, which you sometimes do because it clears the way for your other units to get by. But sometimes you just want to be smacking their leader or smacking their base for 7 every turn, right? Usually you do want to use Hunter to clear the board. And the fact that, like, because the on-attack ability is so strong. If your opponent plays a card that you're able to, and you can usually just kill it for free with Hunter. Hunter basically is just a free counterspell every turn that can sometimes just hit your opponent's base for 7 if it wants to. It doesn't even matter if your opponent has Sentinels down and they want to play like a scary unit from their hand, because they do that. Hunter has Saboteur. You just kill the scary unit, you take like 1 damage back maybe, and then they still, they have their Sentinels up, but you have all your resources, they've used theirs, you're good to go, right? And then if you hide Hunter behind a Sentinel itself so it can't even be hit, that's crazy. But even if you can't do that, even if Hunter's just sort of on the field, your opponent can't like favorably trade into him really. They're probably going to have to throw two units at it. And with the 7 attack, those units are going to die, right? Hunter is just like, it's very close to a bomb. This card is ridiculous and I undervalued it absolutely. I didn't actually realize until the recent PQ just how good it was. I was playing as a Jabba Green player and it just rolled over them. It wasn't even close and it was just because of Hunter basically. Yeah, this card is ridiculous. Next is Regulations Bureaucrat, which I gave a C- to. It's probably closer to a D. I don't really know what I was thinking with this card. This card's very clearly not good. If this is your turn 1 play, that's really rough. I guess the thinking is that it kind of anti-ramps your opponent. So assuming you have initiative, very important for this line. You play this, they play their 2-drop, you claim, they pass. Your first action exhaust a resource. Now they play another 2-drop and you get to play a 3-drop. Whoa, that's so cool. You have 1 3-drop and they have 2 2-drops. Usually they're happier with that situation than you. And then if it ever becomes an issue, they can just kind of kill it for free with 1 action. I just don't think I don't think I ever saw Regulations Bureaucrat. Oh, no, that's not true. I think I saw Regulations Bureaucrat 1 time and it wasn't very good. I've heard people say, oh, but in Leia, and it's like, no, not really, because it costs 2, so you have to use part of your next turn to make it a 1/6. Okay, that's Grogu's stats. Grogu's good, but he's not good because of his stats. He's good for another reason that I guess make his stats relevant, but I digress. Yeah, Regulations Bureaucrat just wasn't very good. I think most of the time I can understand why I gave a card a grade. This one is not really one of those times. I'm not exactly sure why I gave Regulations Bureaucrat a C-, but it is what it is. Then I gave High Command Counselor a B-, probably closer to a C-. This is another one that I'm not exactly sure why I gave this high grade to. I have an idea, and it's the fact. So the line looks like this, right? You play this, they play their 3-3. Next turn, you play an official, and then you can eat their 3-3 with High Command Counselor. But really, that's like such a Christmas Land scenario. And it also assumes that your opponent isn't just going to kind of kill High Command Counselor, like, sort of for free. It's just not very good. You can imagine the scenario where, oh boy, it's a 2-cost 3-4, and that's a good stat line. Sure, absolutely, but it's basically never that, and the fact it defends so poorly, it's just not good. Now, it can't be a D because it is still a fine statted 2. It doesn't immediately die to the 3-3s, so it gives you a little bit of counterplay there. But yeah, you should, if you can play other 2-drops, you should play other 2-drops. Dagoyan Master, I graded incorrectly because it's not in this set. Next up is Emergency Powers. I gave this a C+, probably is a B. I think I was scared because I saw this can't hit leaders. I actually forgot at a PQ that you couldn't put this on a leader. I asked my teammate after the draft, or after the game, I said, why didn't you put Emergency Powers on your leader? And he just it's like, did you read the card? No, yeah, you can't. But in my notes, I did know when I did the set review that you can't put this on leaders. So at the time, I was thinking that's a problem because leaders are somewhat immune to removal, but regular units aren't, right? Any sort of bounce effect or like just straight up removal effect plays so badly into this because you tap 6. You're really excited to put 5 experience counters on your big beater, and then your opponent just hits a Beguile, or they play that capture card or something like that, right? And then that just feels really bad. You're really behind. You've technically gone 1 for 1 in terms of cards, but you've probably gone, well, sorry, no, let me rephrase that. You know, you played this and then your opponent also played a card. So yeah, you're 1 for 1 for cards, kind of, but like also they've in some way incapacitated your unit, whether that's a bounce or a capture or a kill. And then also they've probably spent less resources to do so than you have to put experience counters on them. My thinking at the time was that means it's unfortunately just not very good, but I was wrong, and it's for a couple of reasons. Actually, no, it's for one reason. And the reason is that there's not a lot of removal in the set, and the removal that is in the set, for the most part, is not very good. There's a couple exceptions to that. Obviously, Beguile still plays really well into this, but you know, if you're playing around 1 card, that's maybe okay. Emergency Powers ended up being so good. You could just give something at, like I said, like +5/+5 or +4/+4, and now it's going to be dominating the board. It'll kill your opponent's leader. Maybe it'll probably kill your opponent's leader and live. And it's just, and it will be a continuing threat that your opponent must deal with. Because oftentimes what I saw the play pattern for this was put something on a big unit, kill leader. Now you have like an 8-4 or an 8-5, and your opponent has to run at least 1 unit into it, or you're going to keep hitting their base for 8, right? It's just an absolute beating. And of course, definitely it's kept out of like being a B+ because cards like Beguile are good. But for the most part, I think that you can pick this up pretty highly in any deck that wants it. And then if you put it on like a big Sentinel or something like that, like Jabba's never dying. Next we have Charged with Murder, which I overrated. I remember at the set review that this was already a weird grade for me to give it because I was thinking, surely it's removal. It has to be better than a C+. But like during the set review, I was like, that's so many hoops, right? You have to disclose blue, which is not free. You have to defeat and then you can defeat a non-leader damaged unit. That's so many hoops, and it costs 4. That's so many hoops to jump through to get your removal spell. And I remember thinking, it's still removal. I'll give it a C+, but I think I've seen it played once, and it really just isn't good. I mean, it is still removal, so I can't give it like an F, but it usually does nothing, and it's just such an unfortunate card. There's just 1 fewer hoop, right? If this could hit leaders, it would be fine. If this could hit undamaged units, it would be good. If you didn't have to disclose and it just hit a damaged non-leader unit, maybe that would be good. But with all of these hoops together, it just never really came up, unfortunately. I already expected it to not be good very often, but it was even less good than that. Next, we have Let's Talk. This is a weird one because people have been telling me that Dismantle the Conspiracy is very good. And that one just does the Cad Bane ability where you capture one of your units captures units that cost 7 or less, any number, I think. And people tell me that card's good because it is removal, sure. But this card, it's really rough. And the reason is because the card I just described goes across arenas and it's always going to cost you 6, right? This one sometimes just doesn't cost you 6. And usually you can make it cost you 6, but it's like kind of it's like a downside on itself, right? Like you have to attack into, you have to lose a unit, which is one less unit that you're going to be using to capture. It's not very good. And then of course, if your opponent is running away in space and you don't really have a lot of space stuff, this card's just not going to help you at all. It doesn't go across arena. It anti-synergizes with itself, and I figured, okay, sure, but it's still fine. It's like removal, I guess, so I gave it a C. I knew it was bad removal. I mean, you can tell that because the fact I gave it a worse grade than Charged with Murder, which I already thought was not a good removal piece, and I gave this a worse grade, so I knew it wasn't good removal, but I figured, okay, it's still removal, but really this just never comes up. You should never play around this. If your opponent just has it, then I guess, sure, whatever, but it's probably not going to be that big of a deal for you anyway. Yeah, no, it's just not very good. Aggressive Negotiations is a card that I underrated. This is a card that, this is a little bit of a hot take, but you can sometimes play out of Aspect. Now, not always, just to be clear. No, you should not always play this out of Aspect, but you sometimes can. Just being able to have that reach. Now, people usually see this as like okay, I pay 3 and I get to deal an extra 3 to their base. And that's going to be really good in the case where I could normally hit them to 27, but now I can hit them to 30. And then really bad at every other circumstance. And that's like true if you're going base with it. You want to be able to finish the game with this. You don't want to like be like, okay, turn 2, I play Aggressive Negotiations on my 2-drop and hit your base for 5. Okay, right? Or hit your base for 6, I guess. Like, that's not what you want to be doing with it, right? You want to be using it whenever you are trying to win kind of that turn, if you're going base with it. But this also is like very modal, right? I mean, you don't have to hit base with it. You can use this to trade one of your tiny units up into one of their big units. You can use this on your leader to take out their leader. Leaders basically, in most cases in this set, have higher HP than they do attack. So, for example, if you have Leia and they have Leia, you can Aggressive Negotiations and probably have your Leia kill their Leia, right? That's and live, right? That's very good, and there's lots of circumstances where you can do that. So yeah, it's a finisher and it's a good finisher. It's also removal in a way. So I think this card is really good. And again, the out of Aspect is a little bit delusional maybe, but I think it is good. And I will continue to play this out of Aspect sometimes. No one ever expects Aggressive Negotiations in blue-green, okay? No one ever expects it. All right, and the last event that I want to talk about is Beguile. I've sung this card's praises a lot. Now, this is a card that you can and often should play out of Aspect. It gives you information about your opponent's hand, where there's lots of ways to interact with that in this set. But really, it just bounces something. And with Leia being so good, right, if Leia's like pumped something 3 times and you beguile it, that's going to feel really good for you. You spend a lot of time and a lot of resources, and now you just get to pay 3 or 5 out of Aspect and answer it quite cleanly. That's really, really nice. So it's very good into Leia, but even outside of Leia, it's great, right? If Jabba's hiding behind a Sentinel, you can beguile and then probably just kill Jabba, right? So those are, in my mind, the 2 best leaders in the set, where Beguile's very good into them. It's quite good into a lot of other leaders and decks as well. Beguile's just always a nice answer to have. Next is upgrades. I think I have 2 upgrades in here. The first one is Unveiled Might, which I gave a D+ if you're playing it from hand and a C+ if you're plotting it. It's probably just generally a B-. You basically are always plotting this. And if you're not, that means you've drawn it late game. And if you've drawn it late game, it can sometimes be good depending on the board state, but yeah, I think I'm just like happy giving this a B-. +2, +3 is just so relevant on your leader. This doesn't actually need to go on your leader even when you plot it either. So it's it's just very versatile. Again, you're basically always playing this with plot. Even if you draw it on your leader's flip turn, you can just resource it that turn and immediately get it out. Good, yeah. Big fan of Unveiled Might. It's probably like a B-. And at the I remember my, I think, first draft, I think every single game was determined by who had Unveiled Might and their resources on their flip turn. So It's probably not actually that good. That's probably a little bit of variance on the side of Unveiled Might being better than it is, but it is still very strong. And lastly is Sudden Ferocity for kind of the same reason. I don't think this is quite as good as Unveiled Might, but it's definitely still very, very strong for the same reason. One reason why this is not quite as good as well is it is worse late, oftentimes, right? This one is one that you basically do always want to plot. Unveiled Might you do as well, just to be clear. You never really want to be playing Unveiled Might from hand, but if you do, it's like, I guess. Whereas if you're playing Sudden Ferocity from hand, it's like the world's slowest surprise strike, and your opponent is usually going to be able to deal with that and not have you reap the rewards of the Sudden Ferocity. But that being said, I still think it's probably deserving of the C+ spot. Okay, and that is all. So there's a link to my Patreon. You can check it out if you... I don't post a lot of stuff there, but if anyone has any ideas for stuff I should put there, then by all means do it. But if you just want to support the content, okay? And you want to support my trip to Galactics this year, and you want to support my plane ticket to Vegas for Galactic this year, go check it out. My set review for Lawless Time is going to be long, I'm sure, as you've expected. I don't know how long. I haven't started making it yet because as of now, not all of the cards have been spoiled. But you can assume that it's going to be it will not be brief. The lie in my previous title was just that. I am very excited for Lawless Time, though. It does look like it's going to be a really sweet set. I know I talk so much about Limited on this channel. I play Constructed in Star Wars Unlimited too, and I'm very excited for rotation. Despite the fact that I'm playing like a deck that everyone is like, I want that deck to rotate, which I get. I play Han2 Blue Force, right? Everyone wants Han2 Blue Force to rotate, which fair. I want it to rotate too. Mostly because I'm excited to try another deck, although I do love Han2 Blue Force. I'm sorry. Alright, well that'll probably be the last you hear from me until the Lawless Time pre-release guide. So may the Force be with you, and may the Force be with me as I write, record, and edit another banger. I'm excited to read the comments that y'all have put in the description from the beginning of this video, where I asked about cards that you were the most wrong about, which will hopefully make me feel better about the cards that I was wrong about. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?